What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us once again. CoveringTheCage.com with the Las Vegas Review-Journal, here with your weekly update on Facebook Live. Adam Hill and Heidi Fang here with you. Heidi, how you doing today?
I'm awesome, man. Had a great few days off, ready to rock out, talk some MMA.
There you go. So a lot is going on. We'll get to some of the news and notes going on around the world of MMA. And it's actually a lot of just upcoming events because this is the longest break. I was trying to figure it out yesterday. I was talking to some other people without a UFC event in a long time. Almost a month here without UFC. We go until the beginning of September. That is largely because this month will be dominated by Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. I think the UFC there's some fight coming up. The UFC decided to kind of get out of the way, and there was going to be an event in Seattle. That was the plan all along, with Demetrius Johnson defending his title, and that kind of got pushed back, and that will happen next month now. But so that's off. Nothing else was scheduled. There's always a bit of a summer break, maybe 2 weeks off, but this time you go about 4 weeks without a UFC fight card. So a very different kind of summer here.
I don't remember the last time that had happened, 4 weeks. I mean, we're talking back when we were doing a pay-per-view per month that we were getting that type of a UFC layoff. I can't think of the last time we really had that long, but I mean, the card that we had just last weekend was pretty good. It, give me enough to feed off of until we get the next card coming, and we still have the Tuesday Night Contender Series in the middle, so not totally off.
We do, and obviously, as we said, lots of Conor and Floyd talk the rest of the month. But right now, let's just kind of get into some of the things that are going on in the MMA world, and I think one of the fascinating storylines right now is what is going on with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. The fight was last week. You know, we saw what happened. Jon Jones, the great, comeback, the victory. He has the title back and everything else. And there's a little bit of a bearing of the hatchet after the fight. I mean, Jon Jones hugs him. Cormier is still sad. But Jon Jones says after the fight, you know what? It's been a long time. We've been rivals forever. I don't feel that hatred anymore. Like, he's just a good dude, and we should kind of put it behind us. We didn't really hear the same from Daniel Cormier. Obviously, he was knocked out. He was very emotional. But now Jon Jones is kind of on this publicity tour. He's on Good Morning America. He was on TMZ. And he's saying, not only does he want to bury the hatchet, he said he's willing to be friends with Daniel Cormier. It's a very weird feeling, isn't it?
It is, and I don't think that will ever happen, that they will be friends in the sense that maybe Jon Jones is talking about and hyping and saying that can happen. I think that they will have a mutual respect for each other as competitors, and I think that will come about, but I don't see them hanging out at barbecues together, taking their kids to the park and pushing them down slides. I just don't see all of that kind of happy ending happening with them.
I just wouldn't feel comfortable seeing that. It would just be, it would be so weird. Like, it sounds like a nice kumbaya tale.
Right.
But I wouldn't even feel comfortable with it. It's been such a long journey from, even what we didn't know about back when they were, confronting each other backstage at a fight, to the MGM brawl, to, the emotional time of Jon Jones pulling out of UFC 200, and just all the vitriol and all the hatred and all the buildup. Like, I get it. You've talked to enough fighters over the years to know that, like, when you share, the cage, especially twice, and all the emotion and the passion and the blood and the sweat and everything that goes into that, like, there's just something that bonds you. But with these two guys, it just seems weird. And obviously, it's much easier for Jon. Jon won both fights. Jon has the title. Jon is the redemption story. So it's easy for him to come out and say this. But it's a tough position for Cormier to be in, where not only have you had all this hatred and animosity toward this guy, but now he's beat you twice, and now the guy is trying to, I don't want to say be the bigger man, because I don't think that's fair to say, because again, Jones won, so it's such an easy position for him to be in. But then you look across and, like, you are this good guy, you've portrayed yourself as the good guy, and you have the other guy who's supposed to be the bad guy now reaching out an olive branch to you. It's a really tough position to be in.
Plus, when you look at all of the actual words and phrases and things that Jones said along the way, he said that Cormier chokes in big fights. He said, Cael is one of the better wrestlers of the time, not Cormier. And then he brought up the Olympics with Cormier missing weight and not being able to compete. So these are all things, I'm sure, that with Cormier have stuck in his head. Regardless of what you say is build up, regardless of what you say is just said so that you're getting in your opponent's head and dominating the mental game. I think that some of these things actually stick with somebody like Cormier because of the competitor that he is. And I think that burying the hatchet for Cormier, like you said, isn't as easily done as it is something said, especially when Jones is the person trying to initiate that, and he's beaten him twice. And you go back, a lot of people have been circulating this video around lately. I think it was from like about 3 years ago where Cormier's saying, yeah, there is a tendency I have, and you're not going to figure it out. But if you know which one I'm talking about, then in fact, I think it was something to do with him and the way that he leans into certain punches. And that was the one quirk that actually Jon Jones figured out and managed to take advantage of in the fight. So a lot of people have seen that circulating lately. And when you build all of this up and you have all of those words and then you say things like that, and it'll come back to haunt you. And I'm sure for Cormier, it's haunting him.
Yeah, it's just a really tough position to be in. So now we move forward with Jon Jones. He is the champion. He's back. Obviously, he called up Brock Lesnar. That fight, it would be a long time before it could possibly happen. So I'd have to imagine Jones, who's been out for so long, would not want to wait until possibly next summer, another year off before he fights Lesnar. So I think he's going to find something to do in the meantime. But I think an interesting question that not a whole lot of people have talked about right now because it seems so far off and nobody wants to see it right away. Because what does Cormier do? And if he does want to continue fighting, I don't know what is out there for him. But if he goes and wins, like he's to me the second best fighter out there in the division. So if he goes out and wins 3 more fights, would you want to see this fight again at some point?
I don't think I would. It would take a tremendous win streak from Cormier to be able to have a rationale for needing to see this fight again. And obviously it would be that Jon Jones is still holding the title. He's going to have to defend that belt at some point, whether or not it comes against somebody that can usurp him from the throne, so to speak, would be determined upon all of these circumstances. So other than those two things, like seeing them both on a win streak where they're the only 2 people that have to face each other, I don't think I would want to see it again, especially not within the next year or 2.
Yeah, there would have to be a lot. Cormier would just have to clean out everybody else. I guess maybe while Jones goes up and fights Lesnar, Cormier beats 2 more. He knocks out Gustafsson and maybe like Özdemir, and then it's like, all right, I guess he's the only guy left for him to fight. I know a lot of people have been throwing out, Özdemir could be the next fight. There's a couple other possibilities. Obviously, Gustafsson, there's a lot of history there. That could be possible.
We need a title eliminator. Sorry.
That would be good. This guy told us last week he's absolutely not coming back. But Anthony Johnson, I think, is still the fight that I would want to see the most. I think that's the guy I want to see fight. I talked to him for a long time in Anaheim. I thought it was weird that he was there. If he's retired, why are you coming to the title fight in your division when you're like maybe that next contender? But he said absolutely not. He has no interest. He doesn't want to fight. He's still worried about the head trauma and the CTE, and he's reading more and more studies about it. He's also in the marijuana business now down in Florida. So he's been kind of talking about all the investments he's making there and all the progress. But that's a very compelling fight for him to try to take. I think there's a possibility that that's the guy that comes out and fights.
I would love to see Rumble come back and have that story and have that opportunity. But when you look at how much he gave away the fight to Cormier when he had that opportunity, he basically played into every strength that Cormier had and, in my opinion, gave him the fight. So it's not something that I would want to see right now with Jones. If he just came back out of retirement and say, okay, go ahead and fight Jones, I think he would need to fight a guy like an Özdemir. He would need to fight a guy like a Gustafsson again to get to that point.
I think in a world of just title fights and all that other stuff, then yeah, that'd be the case. But that's not the world anymore that the UFC is living in, and I think it's a marketable fight. Certainly Gustafsson is too. It's just one of those things that I'm sure what Anthony Johnson would say is it's the only fight I'm coming back for. So we'll see. I don't know what is going on. And again, just to put it out there, he said absolutely not. So this is not something he's considering. According to him, he's not thinking about it. He said no way, he's not doing it. But it's just one of those things that kind of lingers out there. Like, where is the next challenge? And Gustafsson is a big one. Özdemir could be, but still, I still think Anthony Johnson's the fight I want to see most in the division. So maybe that's just why I'm putting it out there and holding on to that hope that could potentially happen. Well, we do know what's going to happen, we think, now in the middleweight title picture. It was going to be st-Pierre and Bisping, then it wasn't. Then there's an interim title, and then it's going to be Woodley and st-Pierre. And now, of course, we are back where we started. The press conference that happened all the way back early in the year at UFC 209, Michael Bisping, George St-Pierre. The fight was announced without a date. There's still not a date, but it looks like they are circling in on making it official for Madison Square Garden in November. It's a fight we've talked about many times, but now it looks like it actually is going to come together. So where's your excitement level for George St-Pierre coming back and fighting Michael Bisping?
I've been very excited for the return of George St-Pierre, but when you talk about all the other things that have been put into motion, what happens with Whitaker? These are things that I wonder, where does that come along, that unification, if ever? I mean, what do they do with that? And then how does this story become that Bisping comes back from his injury and then he's facing George St-Pierre? These are things that I think about. I would love to see this fight. I'm really excited to see George St-Pierre return. But it just seems like a unicorn right now, an MMA unicorn that we're never really going to see him come back. It's all of these times that have been talked up. I mean, he shows up at this press conference and then all of a sudden he's not coming back. And, you know, what's the holdup? Why did it take so long to have the date in the first place? And
we're looking at the press conference now where George St-Pierre was accusing Michael Bisping of being drunk at the press conference.
I think he was.
I believe Michael Bisping admitted it at the press conference and said, yeah, I've been out drinking. What do you want from me? So it's been a long, winding road to get here to this point. And you brought up the Whitaker thing, though. I think it becomes very intriguing what happens here.
Yeah.
Because Robert Whitaker does have the interim title. He's theoretically supposed to be next in line. Now, he's hurt, so he can't take the fight right now. But by November, he might be close to coming back. And after that, he might be. I think what happens if George St-Pierre wins is the interesting thing. If Bisping wins, that becomes very easy. Bisping, Whitaker, you fight for the the interim title, the unification. We go from there. I don't know that George St-Pierre has much interest in staying in the middleweight division. I don't know what his plans are. I don't know what he wants to do. I thought it would make sense to come back and get a middleweight title so he could be a 2-division champion. That would be something on his resume. And then probably go back to welterweight and either win the title or have a super fight with Conor McGregor at some point. I mean, I think those are the things that he wants to do. He wants to have big money fights. He wants to have a note in history by being the 2-division champion. So St-Pierre wins, and then he abandons the title to go back to welterweight. Then I guess Whitaker just becomes champion. I don't know what they would do. I don't know how they're going to handle it. I don't know what they're going to do. So that's where this division becomes really interesting. And I'll throw this other one out there because this is crazy, and I think that he's never wanted the fight. So I think this is just another case of me having this this thought out there. But George St-Pierre wins the title. He's the middleweight champion. I think Anderson Silva is going to fight again in the fall. Say he wins. Then the fight that people talked about for years, the super fight in MMA forever, was Anderson Silva, George St-Pierre.
Yeah.
If Anderson Silva is coming off another victory in the fall and St-Pierre wins the title, could that fight be next? I mean, that's possible.
That was the fight I wanted all along. I didn't want Bisping and GSP, and I thought that GSP was actually facing Bisping at the time it was set because he's trained and worked with Stephen Thompson, and Thompson was fighting Woodley for the belt at welterweight, so I figured this is why he's coming back to middleweight plus the layoff, and it would make sense for him to not have such a tremendous weight cut and to be able to come back and fight at a weight class that may be better for his body now than 170. So those were things that I had thought about and processed as to why he was fighting Bisping. But I understand he's the champion, and it would be great to have another 2-division champion, especially somebody like George St-Pierre, who all this time held on to the belt, has like second most in all the records behind Anderson Silva. But then Anderson Silva, GSP, to me, is our version of Pacquiao Mayweather. And it's sad to me that it's happening a little bit after their primes, if it does happen.
If it does, because here's the thing.
If it does, yeah.
I don't think St-Pierre ever wanted the fight. I think that was the thing. I mean, he talked about not wanting to come up and change his body and everything else. I don't think he ever wanted to fight him. I think he looked up to him and he didn't want to have the fight. So I don't know that he's going to want to do it now. But it probably would be for big money, and we'll see what happens with that. And if the McGregor thing doesn't work out, because I think that's his ultimate goal, is win the middleweight title, then come back down to welterweight, fight McGregor at 170. I think that's what he would want to do. But if those things don't work out and Anderson Silva wins, again, if he fights, we expect him to have another fight booked soon. And I think pay attention to who he's booked against. Because if it's a contender or somebody that's borderline contender, that is a potential setup to take a title fight in his next fight. I mean, he's coming off a win, I guess. I mean, I don't think many people thought it was, but he's coming off a win. He gets a second straight win. I think you can start to justify him maybe to get in a title fight. So I guess pay attention to who Anderson Silva gets booked against in his next fight, and that could tell you a lot about what the plans are for the future of the division. So that's the middleweight division. There is a new division coming along, at least one for now, because we might have a whole bunch of new weight classes coming aboard in MMA. In MMA, I guess they're here now. They've been passed, but in the UFC, they might adopt them. They've talked about it. I know Dana White said last week absolutely not, and then some other officials came out 2 days later and said, yeah, we might go ahead and do this. So might be new weight classes coming. We'll pay attention, but there is one certain new weight class coming to the UFC in the women's flyweight division. TUF 26 cast is revealed. A couple of locals. The first one, Roxanne Modafferi, who has been on the show before, I think is a terrific story. Roxanne was on, she was on the reality show. She was kind of she was kind of goofy. Everybody loved her. She's such a nice person. But she was, I'll just say right now, she was not that great, especially in stand-up. She had good ground game. She just wasn't a really good fighter. The work that she has put in at Syndicate has been unbelievable. She is absolutely a legitimate fighter now, and I am excited for her to have the opportunity to try to get through this season of TUF and be crowned the first ever women's flyweight champion.
I think, like you said, it's a tremendous story, and for women in this sport, I think that they're evolving with the game. Women right now in MMA, they're coming up to the point where you're finding women who have just trained in MMA, but for the longest time, the pioneers of the sport, when you look at people like Roxanne Modafferi, when you think of people like Shayna Baszler, they weren't necessarily well-rounded in all aspects when it started. They either, like you said, had a good ground game, or they had good striking, or you had people like Ronda Rousey who were specialists with, arm bars and judo, but when it came to being all around, I think Ronda Rousey kind of started that, where it became, the sport had to evolve because she was so good. And, I think like people like Sarah McMahon, people like Roxanne Modafferi have definitely found ways to round out their game. And the striking that John Wood has worked with Roxanne has really improved her game. You're seeing her, in the past, I think when you would watch her fight, she would come in with just single punches and not really put together combinations, and now she's doing all of it. So
with nothing behind them too. Like it was just like she was striking cuts almost she had to.
Yeah. And
now she wants to and she's capable of doing it. I think it's a tremendous story. And when I say I don't think she was very good the first time she was on TUF, like I'm not knocking her. I'm saying to look from where she was to where she is now is a real testament not only to the gym but to the work that she's put in. And she's always said, I'm a real fighter. I want to be a real fighter. I don't want to be this character that a lot of people portrayed her as. Yeah. She is a real fighter, and I think all the credit in the world has to go to her for putting in that kind of work at the gym. It's an unbelievable transformation since she's really been here in Las Vegas. Not the only local on the show, though. I know you have spoken to Emily Whitmire before. I saw her at the TUF tryouts, and I remember tweeting out, I don't know what they're looking for exactly, but she looks like a legitimate fighter, and she looks like a threat, and she did make the cast. And so you have a little bit of experience with her, and I guess what are people going to see from her?
Well, I remember the biggest thing that stood out about her to me was every time I would go into Extreme Couture and go to interview different fighters, Emily was always there. She is always in the gym. And I remember Ray Sefo telling me she is somebody that he has to try to say, hey, maybe you should take a recovery day. Maybe you should set out this session and not work here, all 3 sessions during the day for MMA. And she's just a workhorse. And this girl is really well-rounded. Like I was talking about, women who come in and start from the bottom as training in all aspects of MMA, not just grappling, not just judo, not just wrestling, but she has every single facet of the game in her arsenal. And she's somebody I would say as a new breed of the women fighter that you're going to have to look out for, because you don't know where she's going to attack from. She's very unpredictable. She's got good striking. She's got good wrestling. I think that her work ethic is probably a really high bar that a lot of people are going to find that this girl just doesn't quit. And that's something that is a real big testament to how much she has put behind training.
There you go. So she started from the bottom, and now she's on TUF 26, and that'll be August 30th, the first episode airing. So make sure you check that out. coming up, and we'll have a lot more information up at coveringthecage.com as we get closer to that season, which will crown the first women's flyweight champion. Dana White Contender Series once again tonight, and you'll be out there. You'll have a video, I'm sure, of whoever picks up the contract, if there's one or two fighters that impress, and we'll see if Snoop Dogg goes crazy again about somebody. So check that out. And we mentioned Floyd and Conor. They are coming up later in the month. We'll have so much about that fight, and media days Thursday and Friday. So make sure you check out Covering the Cage and the Las Vegas Review-Journal for all the information on those guys. And we'll be back with you next week, letting you know what is going on in the world of MMA, keeping you up to date here, coveringthecage.com and the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Adam Hill, Heidi Fang, follow us, and Covering the Cage on all your social media platforms.